Hey, what's going on, everyone? How you guys doing today? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is Three Buck Theater, and apparently the premiere for Birds of Prey just happened in London. Of all places, you figure LA is usually the city for these things, but I know that they flew a bunch of journalists from LA to London for the premiere. I want that kept in mind as we look at a lot of these reactions. Now, there was screening in LA as well. So people did see the movie today, and the first reactions are in. But again, for the ones that are saying that they're at the premiere in London, as far as I know, they were flown out there by Warner Brothers. So that's Access Media. Now, I'm not knocking it because I would love to one day be flown from Seattle to London, a city of which I've never been, in order to attend a premiere put on by a studio. I'm not knocking it. But I would be upfront with you and be like, look, this is lit. So take my opinion with an absolute grain of salt, as you always should. But let's see here. First reactions to Birds of Prey paint the film as an ass-kicking good time. So before we jump in, there is one thing I do want to address here. The story leaks that came out a few months ago do, for the most part, seem to be true. And just like with Rise of Skywalker, and just like with Terminator Dark Fate, without context, it sounded kind of bad. Right. Without context, it sounded kind of terrible. And I was not a big fan of what I read. But I did talk to somebody who saw the movie the other day and kind of quelled my trepidations of it. And friends of mine saw it today as well, and their response was pretty good. So Germain Lucier, who, if you follow Harloff at all, says he gets into everything, saying that Birds of Prey is solid. The unpredictable structure keeps the first half moving, and the action boosts the rest. Robbie is excellent, as is McGregor. It's tamer than expected, and the basic story can get lost in the complex setups, but it works more often than not. And that would be probably a fair analysis, right? This movie doesn't appear to necessarily have that complex of a story, but to be fair, what movies do these days? No, and I mean that like legitimately. Like, what movies have insane complex stories? This is a comic book film that's meant to be an action movie that's also setting up it's a sequel, it's setting up new characters and everything else. So take that for what you will. Eric Davis here says Birds of Prey has terrific action, humor, and some of the more memorable characters we've seen in a DC movie. But the biggest highlight is Margot Robbie. She is fantabulous as Harley, while also proving that sometimes our most valued relationships are the ones we have with good food. Interesting. I mean, that's an interesting take, in my opinion. I kind of thought Harley was one of the worst elements of the trailers, to be fair. I don't know if the ADR wasn't done yet, but she sounded like she was a little bit too over the top, and it just kind of took me out of it. The last trailer sold me on it, but apparently food is going to have a big part of this one, probably based upon that scene in the one trailer where she's just like, horking back Cheese Whiz simply because her and Mr. J broke up. He also goes on to say here that also Ewan McGregor and Chris Messina are so out of their minds in this film, probably my favorite villains of the new era of DC films. They are both nuts in all the best ways, and our rating certainly helps. Plus, a shout out to Rosie Perez, who steals a lot of scenes too. Now, this is what I think we're going to be seeing a lot of in regards to the commentary and the coverage of this movie. The R rating is going to be a massive selling point. And even though Germain Lucier was like, it's tamer than you might expect, this is going to pave the way for these kind of big budget tentpole action comic book movies to be R-rated, to play in that world, and then to still basically be a vehicle to make an absolute crapload of money. That's how I personally view it. And that's something that I think is DC's going to really focus on after the success of Joker. And if this movie is successful, definitely. And that's going to be something that I think hurts Marvel ultimately, because the homogenized version of the MCU, while I love that and I will watch every one of those projects and movies, obviously I would love to see it go a little bit more hardcore for some of those characters. That's why the Netflix show was so well received. And this is something that we're not going to get out of Kevin Feige and Bob Iger because they're too afraid of that kind of controversy. Although I do think that with the 20th Century Fox label, they will, or well, 20th Century Studios now, that they will eventually migrate that path. But DC is going to beat him to the punch and could potentially take over in providing that kind of comic book based R-rated content. Now, Meg Downey here says, so Birds of Prey was an absolute blast. Harley feels exactly like the human Looney Tune she ought to be. The Black Mask is a scene stealer. Dina, Helena, Cass, and Renee all rule. This was everything I wanted from DC movies and then some. So let me also point out something real quick. Suicide Squad did very, very, very well, predominantly because women were the number one viewer of that movie, right? They were the ones who kept going back. Actually, teenage girls kept going back because in regards to merchandise for DC products, it's Batman and then Harley Quinn. And then I think Joker, but it's definitely Harley is number two. So they know that there is a big fan base for Harley that come out of women, and that women are going to be the ones that are going to be, I think, putting up the most money for this. This is why it's female directed, it's female led. You're going to get a big turnout from women, and that's going to be something that brings this movie a lot of success. And there's people there that are trying to argue that the sex appeal isn't there. Look, women aren't going to have a problem with that. I'm just saying, women aren't going to have a problem with that. You're going to see a lot of comments. Anyway, Jill Pantozzi here says, Birds of Prey is ridiculous and a rad superhero film. The fight scenes are phenomenal. The villains are delicious. It shouldn't have taken this long to get Birds of Prey on film, but it was a lot of fun. So with that, though, I'm wondering how much Kathy Yan is going to get praised for the fight scenes because they brought in Chad Stahelski from the John Wick franchise to reshoot the action scenes. So we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But I did see another comment early on that had suggested that the action scenes felt very John Wick. And I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense because the director did those. Anyway, Eric Francisco here says Birds of Prey's killer. A slow start and awkward plotting doesn't stop the movie. All of these characters from soaring to the end. Wildly violent F-bombs out the wazoo and the best bat fight scene since the Raid 2. If Margot Robbie could control this part of the DCU, she should. Well, I mean, that could be where things go. There's been the rumor that it's going to be Birds of Prey, then Gotham City Sirens, and then Birds of Prey versus Gotham City Sirens is the rumor. But I don't know how well. I mean, it all really depends on, like, for one, how well this movie does. If we get Birds of Prey 2, and I think we probably will. Let's see. Mike Rougeau says here, just saw Birds of Prey, and I'm happy to report that it's my favorite modern DC movie yet. Like Shazam, it carves its own path, a totally unique aesthetic, action, and tone. Margot, Ewan, and the rest are 100% fantabulous. Why aren't there more roller skate action scenes? Well, I agree with that one. But again, I do like the comparison to Shazam. I did think Shazam, while in the DCEU, definitely did well to carve out its own aesthetic. And that is something, too, that Marvel doesn't have, right? Marvel is very producer-driven content. DC is very filmmaker-driven content. And that sometimes collides with one another, visually, tonally speaking, at least. But I think that, people are willing to kind of like overlook certain things. And Marvel's done a little bit with that, like Doctor Strange and Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor Ragnarok. They've kind of, moved out a little bit to some extra elements, but really it's very homogenized. And this one feels like it's not. So that's pretty cool too. Terry Schwartz here says, saw Birds of Prey this morning, liked it a lot. The stuff I loved, the action, the tone, and how creative the direction was. Margot Robbie completely sells the incredibly choreographed fight sequences and their gleeful brutality. This whole scene in general, and that was where she basically gets high on cocaine and beats the crap out of some dudes with some bats. That sold me in the trailer. That was funnier than hell. Terry here goes on to say, this looks and feels so different than any other superhero movie I've seen, and I feel like I will say this, what they wish Suicide Squad would have been an execution. Full credit to Kathy Yan for that. It's clear they had a lot of fun making something so different. Finishing up here, she says, I'm pretty sure if you look at the total amount of action sequences versus total screen time, this would be one of the highest percentages of action in the modern comic book era. Someone do the math. So again, they kind of wanted to play at the action. I think they wanted to really make this a female-led action-based film, and that's cool. That's actually fine with me. If the action is great, it's in your face, it's over the top, I'm 100% on board with that. Laura Prudham here says, Birds of Prey is a riot, oozing with attitude and some of the most inventive, bone-crunching fight scenes in the superhero genre to date. I went in with low expectations and was pleasantly surprised by how much fun I had. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it definitely has style to spare. So, kind of paint by the numbers is what I take from that, and that's, again, what to be expected. She also had lower expectations, probably not a big fan of Suicide Squad or just maybe the DC films in general, and it wowed her. And if you notice here, a lot of these people, a lot of who JoeBlow.com is quoting here are women, and the women are coming out saying that it's great. That's something to keep. Again, when I talk about that, it's not me being sexist. It's not me trying to pigeonhole a group. I'm merely pointing out that when it comes to consumerism, you're going to get a lot of that from women. Angie Han here says Birds of Prey, winning characters above average action, and a killer soundtrack hampered by uneven tone and pacing. The girls are at their best together, and they're not together enough. Mary Elizabeth Winstead's Huntress is the not-so-secret MVP. Okay, so good characters, kind of an uneven storytelling. They're better when they're together. Kind of like, this is going to sound kind of weird, kind of like Rise of Skywalker, or where it's like in The Last Jedi, they were separate, and people complained about that. And then they were back together in The Rise of Skywalker, and some people, not everyone, but I would say probably most people, were happier that the group was together. So when you have that chemistry, you have that dynamic, this is what fans want to see. Jason Gracio here says, if you like violence often, or if you like your violence often and a lot of dirty language, you're going to love Birds of Prey. It feels very Deadpoolish in that way. But then again, had Chris Messina chewing every piece of scenery in sight. And I'm okay with that. The DC needed a Deadpool, right? Like, I would argue Joker was probably more like in line with Logan and its tone and what they were going for. But Deadpool wasn't a mitigated success, and Birds of Prey kind of needed to top that. And it looks like this is what they're trying to do, which basically is just going to mean that Ryan Reynolds and those guys are going to have their work cut out for them over there at 20th Century Studios. Eric Eisenberg here says Birds of Prey isn't a Birds of Prey movie so much as it is Harley Quinn movie featuring Birds of Prey, and that creates issues story-wise and in fleshing out characters. But it's a hell of a lot of fun. And it's at its best when it's going full Harley vision, and Margot Robbie is clearly having a blast. And that's been a complaint by comic book fans, is that it's like Harley Quinn, like just call it Harley Quinn, don't call it Birds of Prey. I've been hearing that for a while, and that is, I think, one of the problems that Warner Brothers had. It's like, remember, this was originally supposed to be Gotham City Sirens, and then they changed it to Birds of Prey, but Birds of Prey is not, featuring Harley Quinn. But it's just one of those things where it's like, you could tell this is a DC films department change up, that they're just kind of in name only sort of thing. That's how I take that. Alicia Garuso here says Birds of Prey is like John Wick, where run through a crazy funhouse filter and stuff full of glitter and F-bombs. It's everything you want from Harley Quinn and her badass girl gang into the movie completely. So there we go. So that was that John Wick comment I mentioned earlier. Courtney Howard here says, Birds of Prey is an absolute blast, an undeniably fun live wire jolt of adrenaline, delightfully devilish and deliciously wicked. This irreverent, rule-breaking riot delivers a contact high. Kathy Yan is a genius. Robbie, Smollett, Winstead, Perez, and Bosco are perfection. Well, those were a lot of adjectives, and she seems to paint that it's good. She goes on to say here that loved how Yan builds her masterful mayhem with visual gags and colorful aesthetics. Action sequences are capably choreographed, shot, and assembled, showing off an invigorating stunt spectacular, spotlighting women as individuals and as a team. And that's the thing. They're not going to give any credit to Chad Stahelski on that one, right? Like I said, Kathy Yan's going to get all the credit in the world for this when it's like they brought in an accomplished stunt choreographer and a very accomplished film director to handle this. And I'm not against it. But it's like, I'm going to laugh at that because, these are journalists. These are access media people who write these articles that I get this kind of information from. And yet, I don't know if it's going to be willful overlooking or, just they don't know about it. Anyway, Brandon Davis here says, Birds of Prey is a lot of fun and violent as hell. The birds are so entertaining and distinctly different from each other. Ewan McGregor is so sinister and often hilarious. If Birds of Prey has told me anything, is that we need a whole lot more Canary and Huntress. They are great, but there's a lot left on the bone. The only fair comparison for Birds of Prey, if you want one, is Deadpool. They have a lot in common, especially their use of the fourth wall breaking and R ratings. And like I said, DC needed a Deadpool. And so they're kind of copying a bit of its aesthetic with the, fourth wall breaking and the R rating and the F-bombs. And as long as the story's good and it's fun and has heart, which is what Deadpool had in spades, that's one of the reasons why it did as well as it did. Deadpool 2 lost the heart, and that was one of the reasons why it made less money. Also a poor release date, let's be fair. Kristen Lopez here says, absolutely blown away by Birds of Prey. Kathy Ann and DP Matthew Libatique create a visually distinct and luscious film that's badass, funny, and provocative. Journey Smollett steals the show. Full review coming soon. All right, she seems to like it. Sean O'Connell says, believe this, Birds of Prey whips all sorts of ass. It's hard-hitting, unapologetic origin story for the team and a terrific, vicious vehicle for Margot Robbie. Violent, funny, with crazy fun action, and Ewan McGregor is on a different frequency, but wildly entertains. And again, the overall aspect here is entertainment is what we're getting, right? We're getting a lot of entertainment. People seem to be really liking it. Let's see here. Scott Mendelson, Mr. Disney shill himself. What does he say? He says, Birds of Prey is delightfully unassuming and unconcerned with its place in the larger context. It's a bonkers, bananas crime comedy and a genuine party movie. Everyone is having a blast. But Mary Elizabeth Winstead plays Huntress like a supporting character from The Tick. It rocks. So that's good from Scott. And he's had some pretty bad takes recently too. He's been getting roasted on Twitter pretty hardcore from some of his takes. He's a Disney shill. He absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say that this dude gets paid, because I would never make that comment, like legitimately make that comment. But it's like, if you were going to sit there and go, does anyone in Hollywood ever take a check from a studio? Most people who are like film enthusiasts would go, Mendelsohn. Or if it ever came out that he did, they would be like, yeah, I kind of saw that coming, you know. Anyway, Scott Menzel here says, Birds of Prey, Kathy Yan has created a music-infused celebration of female badassery. DC continues to take big risks and push boundaries. The perfect Harley Quinn movie. Margot Robbie crushes it. I loved all these ladies, and I'm looking forward to the sequel / spinoff, which is apparent that that's going to happen. Although I wouldn't be surprised if any of this goes to HBO Max, if we find out there's something that goes to HBO Max here pretty soon. Scott goes on to say here, the film takes you inside the mind of Harley Quinn and is told from her perspective. It's bold and takes a lot of chances. Also, this film is a true representation of diversity on screen. Oh, and the soundtrack is badass. Birds of Prey is pretty effing awesome. I loved every minute of it. And that's, you know, what's going on with these guys right here. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of people that are all praising it. Nothing really negative. Now, that could just be what Joe Blow had said. Nothing really negative on it. We'll find out more when it goes wide. I'm sure it's going to get pretty scathing reviews from a few people out there. But it's one that is going to be definitely aimed at the female demographic. It's women-led, women-directed, you know, and that's going to be a big factor. A lot of people are going to be tuning in, a lot of women are going to come out for that. But the question then becomes, will it also attract the male demographic? Because there was one guy, Matthew Kaddish on Twitter, that was all like, oh, it's going to bomb like Charlie's Angels because like it's not sexy. And people are dragging this dude, like really dragging this guy. I dragged him too because it's a stupid comment to say. But, you know, this is where the divide's going to be. Some people out there want the women to be like they are in the comic books, you know, lots of cleavage, spandex, leotards, yoga pants, great curves. You're looking at everything and you can just see everything if you just look real close, you know, and that's what they want. And that's not realistic. And not to say that these movies are realistic, but you're never going to get that realism. You know, you're never going to get the pinup centerfold aspect that a lot of these characters are drawn as. And again, this is what becomes a masturbatory fantasy. It's true. So, you know, again, I think when it comes to the female demographic that's going to go to this movie, they want fun, competent, ass-kicking characters. As long as there's a decent story and it's a lot of fun to watch, you're going to get a lot of people that dive into it. And that is where we find ourselves at the end of the day here. So this video has gone on for far too long. I fully admit I didn't realize it was going to be this long. If you are going to go see Birds of Prey opening weekend, which I think is next week, let me know in the comment section. If you made it this far in the video, I applaud your patience. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. I'll talk to you all later. Have yourself a great day, guys, and peace out.